pulled back with a rubber band. He was first generation like Gabe, whose parents had been born in Mexico and Puerto Rico. Fabian waved him into the office. "Did you see the calendar alert?" Gabe bit back a frustrated growl. Thinking about New York made him think about his family, a topic that always tanked his mood. "How could I miss it?" "I figured you'd say that. Come on, I've got some updates." Gabe followed Fabian into the office, trying to ignore the piles of paper on Fabian's desk, and floor, and chair. Fabian claimed having everything out where he could see it counted as an organizational system, and while it made Gabe twitchy, he couldn't deny that the guy was a genius at what he did. They'd started Agility together when they were 26 and filled with the fire to build something of their own, a gym focused on physical therapy and rehab. Gabe had gotten interested in sports medicine after blowing out his knee and working on his recovery with the UCLA team doctor. After graduation, Gabe worked as a personal trainer and went back to school for physical therapy. Fabian had followed up undergrad with an MBA. The gym itself was Gabe's vision, but Fabian had the skills to make it happen. And so, Agility Gym had been born. 5 years later, it was now a hotspot for Hollywood stars. And at 31 years old, Gabe was tired as fuck. But there was no rest for the wicked, and there was still work to be done. He waited for Fabian to move a pile of papers from the guest chair before he sat down. Fabian took his place behind his desk and pulled a few brightly colored sticky notes off his computer monitor. Gabe, who'd gone paperless 3 years ago, withheld a comment. "Ah, here we go." Fabian held up a blue sticky note. "Today marks 1 year until we have to open an Agility Gym branch in New York City, as per the terms of our investment agreement with Powell." Gabe crossed his arms and waited for Fabian to get to the point. Richard Powell, their first investor, had insisted they open a location in New York City within 6 years, mainly so Powell could use it while he was on the East Coast for work. They'd met Powell through an investment competition for recent grads, and he'd been the first one to give them a chance. At the time, they'd been thrilled that Powell had taken such an interest in the gym. But lately, his involvement left Gabe wondering who was actually in charge here. "I know you don't want to, but you've got to get started on this, dude," Fabian said, a note of apology in his voice. "I can hold down the fort here, but I can't travel back and forth like we'd planned." Resentment simmered in Gabe's gut. When they'd made the agreement, Fabian had assured Gabe he'd handle it when the time came. He was the one with the vision for the New York location and the drive to get it done. But Fabian's life had expanded in ways they never could have foreseen. Since then, Fabian had gotten married and bought a house. His wife, Iris, an entertainment lawyer, was pregnant with twins, and their home renovation project had turned into a beast. On top of all that, Fabian's parents had moved in with him in advance of his father's open-heart surgery, which was scheduled to take place in a few weeks. Gabe was happy for him. He really was. Fabian had always wanted to be a dad, and even though Gabe didn't feel the same impulse, he could still be happy for his friend. But Gabe wasn't happy about what it meant for him. For all his messiness, Fabian was a great business partner and an even better friend. He knew about Gabe's issues with his family, and he'd never have stuck Gabe with this task if there'd been another choice. Gabe hadn't been back to New York since his sister's wedding 9 years ago, where he and his parents had made a scene, and his father had yelled, "Don't come back," at his retreating form. "I know I have to do it," Gabe said, shaking off the memory. Managing the New York launch was something he'd resigned himself to, once he'd realized the 1-year mark was coming up and Fabian was in no position to go anywhere. "I'll help how I can from afar," Fabian offered. He held up his other hand, which had 3 pink sticky notes stuck to his fingers. "That's what I wanted to update you on. I've made some inquiries." Gabe shifted in the chair, getting comfortable. "Let's hear it." Fabian peeled a note off his finger and squinted at whatever he'd written there. His notes looked like they were written by a 2-year-old who'd decided to try writing upside down. "I've reached out to a real estate agent to help us find a space, a contractor to give us a renovation quote, and—" Fabian wiggled his middle finger, which held the final pink sticky note. "I found the mastermind behind the Victory Fitness rebrand." At that last bit, Gabe leaned forward.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.